keep missing about this story is that it was never really about a TV argument or a celebrity feud. It was about power, accountability, and what happens when someone who thrives on applause runs into someone who doesn't need it. The moment that set everything off didn't happen at a rally or a courtroom. It happened in broad daylight, over coffee mugs, on a show designed for polite conversation, and that's exactly why it hits so hard. When Donald Trump made the claim that there was a growing anti-white sentiment in America, it wasn't framed as a policy argument or a data point. It was framed as grievance, the same familiar move he's relied on for years. But this time, the response wasn't a think piece or a late-night punchline. It was immediate, direct, and impossible to spin. Whoopi Goldberg didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She simply said what millions of people have been thinking for decades, but rarely hear spoken so plainly on national television. Nobody in your family was hunted because of their skin color. Nobody in your family was terrorized by law or rope or torch for simply existing. There is no anti-white crisis here. What you're pushing is something far uglier and far more dangerous. That exchange didn't just irritate Trump, it detonated something, because it did the one thing he hates more than criticism. It removed the drama. It reduced a manufactured narrative to its bones and asked a moral question instead of a political one. And once that happened, there was no easy way to punch back. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to rewind long before Trump became a permanent headline, long before social media turned outrage into a business model, back when daytime television was still considered soft, safe, and largely inconsequential. The View was never supposed to be a battleground. It was a round table. No smoke, no chanting crowds, no flashing graphics, just conversation. And that's what made it so dangerous to anyone selling spectacle. The real turning point came in 2011 when Trump pushed the birther conspiracy into the mainstream like it was a legitimate question instead of a racist fantasy. Many people hedged, many people danced around it. Whoopi didn't. She looked straight into the camera and stripped the idea of its costume. She didn't ask whether it was offensive, she explained why it was rotten. That moment didn't go viral the way clips do now, but it lodged itself somewhere deeper. It was the first time a lot of viewers realized that daytime TV could say what cable news kept tiptoeing around. From there, the pattern set in. Every time Trump escalated, Whoopi responded not with theatrics, but with translation. She took rambling statements and turned them into plain English. She took bravado and turned it into verbs. When he talked about strength, she talked about responsibility. When he talked about winning, she talked about consequences. And that contrast grew sharper as the country entered a constant state of crisis theater. When the White House floated the idea of paying women to have more children, the discussion didn't drift into abstract culture wars. Whoopi cut straight to reality. $5,000 doesn't raise a child. It barely covers the hospital bill, and even that number shrinks once taxes take their share. It wasn't a rant, it was math, and math, unlike slogans, doesn't care who's offended. That's what made these moments accumulate power. Individually, they looked like TV debates. Collectively, they formed a record, a rhythm. Trump would provoke, the internet would explode, and then, quietly but firmly, daytime television would replay the tape and ask a question nobody else wanted to ask. Does this make sense in real life? By 2019, the tension boiled over. The censors started working overtime. Bleeps hit the airwaves, not because the hosts suddenly lost control, but because the polite language ran out. When you're dealing with someone who floods every conversation with noise, eventually clarity sounds disruptive. The bleeps weren't scandal, they were punctuation. They told the audience that something abnormal was happening in a place designed for normalcy. Trump tried to brush it off. For a while, he treated The View like a nuisance, something beneath him. That illusion shattered when Donald Trump Jr. walked onto that couch and discovered that the environment he thought he controlled didn't belong to him. The crosstalk, the pushback, the refusal to play along, it rattled him. And when the family responded afterward, it wasn't with facts, it was with insults. Filthy, disgusting, demented. The same vocabulary recycled. Whoopi's response was devastating precisely because it was unbothered. She didn't deny it, she owned it. Yes, she was filthy. She always had been. And he knew that when he hired her, not once, but repeatedly. The insult collapsed under its own weight. You don't get to act shocked by the very thing you paid for. Years passed. The feud never really cooled. It just changed forms. Clips resurfaced, claims were recycled. Each attempt to reframe the story only proved how deeply it lingered, because this wasn't about a personal slight, it was about narrative control, and The View stubbornly refused to hand that over. By 2024, the gloves were fully off. Trump turned a rally into a roast, flinging insults like confetti. The next morning, Whoopi didn't clap back with sarcasm. She brought receipts. She replayed his words and then she dismantled them, one by one. The anti-white claim wasn't controversial. It was insulting, not to her, but to history. And when she said it out loud, the argument died right there. 7 words later, she ended another illusion entirely. No sermon, no flourish, just a statement that reminded everyone that reality still exists, even when people pretend it doesn't. What makes these moments stick isn't the zingers, it's the repetition. Daytime television doesn't rely on shock, it relies on memory. It asks the same question over and over until pretending not to hear it becomes exhausting. Why are we acting like this is normal? Why are we excusing behavior we'd fire anyone else for? Why does spectacle get graded on vibes while everyone else gets graded on results? During shutdowns, during chaos, during endless rebranding of dysfunction, Whoopi's role became clearer. She wasn't there to entertain outrage, she was there to do maintenance, to remind viewers that leadership isn't a performance, and that consequences don't disappear just because someone talks loudly enough. That's why her words land with people who aren't glued to political feeds: parents, workers, people living paycheck to paycheck. When she says, "Get your behind in gear," it doesn't sound like ideology. It sounds like the voicemail the country has been leaving for years. Trump thrives on volume. Whoopi thrives on clarity. He turns criticism into proof of importance. She turns boasting into evidence. He wants to be judged on emotion. She insists on action. That's not a celebrity feud. That's a collision between two worldviews that cannot share the same dictionary. And that's why this never really ends, because as long as spectacle demands applause, there will be someone sitting at a table in the middle of the day, coffee cooling, asking the simplest and most dangerous question of all: does this pass the smell test? For a long time, noise won, but repetition changes things. Patterns become visible, excuses wear thin, and once someone names the habit, it becomes very hard to sell it again. That's the real story. Not who yelled louder, not who insulted whom, but who kept translating chaos back into plain language and refused to stop.